Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. My name's Alistair Mordey. Friends call me Ali, as Sam said. I'm the program director and co-founder of the iCAAD Group, which are a multinational group based in Thailand. Those of you that know me will know that already, but what you might not know is that over the last 12 months, we've started working intensively with young adults in Thailand in a small intimate treatment centre called The Edge. So The Edge is similar to other cabin projects. All these photos that I'm going to show you in this presentation are real photos of our guys in action. And they're quite arresting images. All of our guys are 18 to 28 years old, so they're young men. Emerging adults is what we call them. And it's quite a good way of phrasing it, because that's really obviously what it's all about. It's helping young adults to emerge, which is not necessarily that easy in this day and age. Like other cabin projects, we utilize a lot of authentic Thai tradition. So we've always used mindfulness meditation, even in our mainstream treatment program. But what's different about The Edge? There's a lot of wilderness programs and such like around the world, but we're using Muay Thai boxing, which is pretty edgy. That's the name, The Edge. For young men whom that's not suitable, then they will do triathlon. And there's a couple of demographics there that won't be suitable for Muay Thai boxing. Young men that have had significant violence trauma, and I'm sure you're already asking yourself this question: how the hell does punching each other in the face help healers from trauma and addiction? It's a bit of an obvious question. In an hour and a half you will understand, you will have the answer to that. But the first thing that we will do is remove young men from this track who have got specific violence episodes in the past and trauma from that. And also young men who are already very good fighters. They won't be strapping the gloves on. They will be doing triathlon and getting really, really annoyed with us because they can't fight, which of course is the whole point. Is to go and make them lose bulk, get slimmer, do something they don't like doing. Usually big guys that are good at fighting don't like running and cycling at all. It's the type of sport which is furthest from what they want to do. So they do that, and they have their own battle. I'll explain that to you as well as we go along. For those of you who don't know much about Muay Thai, a very, very quick background. I said all the photos are real. Obviously this is a photo, isn't a real photo, it's a photograph of a wall, specifically a carving on a wall. And these guys are about 200 years old. So you can see this guy in the top right-hand corner with the pointy hat, the silly hat, riding an elephant. That will be a Thai or Burmese general. This looks like Burma invading northern Thailand about 200 years ago. And Muay Thai is a battlefield type of unarmed combat that would have been used by the Burmese, Cambodians and Thais, and it's still a popular sport across those three countries. So this, I'll explain to you what's going on here. This gentleman, well, these two guys are obviously not getting on very well at all. This guy this gentleman here on the right has just slipped a punch, and so he's inside the gentleman on the left's leg. The gentleman on the left is just trying to teep him or push him out of the way. So a teep is a front kick that's really just like it's almost like pushing the other person away. So this gentleman has slipped the punch, and slipping is a real art form, because when somebody's punching you, you don't want to be moving your head in an exaggerated fashion. You're just going to slip their punch, which means they almost graze you. So the closer you are to it, the better a move it is. So he's just slipped the punch because he's very, very sneaky. And exactly what's going to happen now is he's going to kick this gentleman on his peroneal nerve, which is just on the inside of the thigh, just above the knee. And if you ever get kicked on the peroneal nerve, it's not something that you're going to forget, because he isn't going to be able to stand up for anything between 30 seconds and 3 days, which on a battlefield is a really annoying situation to be in, as you can well imagine. And of course, they will have shin bones that are rather more like iron rods than shin bones, because repeatedly kicking objects, even soft objects like a punch bag, will create microfractures, which then calcify, and the bone becomes very, very hard. So therein lays the danger, is in the shin bones, and we can readily see that Muay Thai boxing is very dangerous. Okay, so there's issues in that. There's big issues in that. It's probably quite a lot more dangerous than Western boxing. So the obvious question then becomes, WTF? What are we playing at? What the hell are we doing? Using a dangerous fighting sport to heal people from addiction when we know that addiction is primarily caused by childhood trauma or developmental trauma, right, which we'll go into. And the answer is, fighting doesn't help heal people from addiction and trauma. Fighting doesn't help anything. Violence doesn't solve anything. So, hint, hint, it's not in the fighting. Okay, and we're going to go, first of all, through what causes addiction, because there are several dominant models, and as far as I can see, we don't quite understand the subtleties behind a childhood trauma model or behind the disease model. So I'm going to go briefly through how we think about addiction, how we think it's caused, and iron out some of those subtle misunderstandings before I then explain how physical exercise and fighting sports may help young men in particular. So, the developmental model is the model that we all use, basically. For me, I see there have been two dominant models in addiction treatment, or two potential models. The disease model, which everybody gets het up about, and they say it isn't the disease of this, that, and the other, and the developmental model, which is what you almost certainly use. So by development, obviously we mean development through childhood stages, through early life. And the principle that's at work underneath developmental thinking is plasticity, brain plasticity. So if we assume that what happens to us as a child is going to create the end product adult, that's developmental thinking. We all think that way. 20th century is dominated by developmental thinking. This is Sigmund Freud's great legacy. If you forget all the stuff about mums and dads and sex and incest, what he was basically telling us is your childhood's really important, that creates the adult, and before him we didn't think that way. It seems like a no-brainer to us now that childhood is really, really important. We're very impressionable during childhood and that creates the end product as an adult, but we didn't used to think that way before Freud. And that is the developmental model, and the attachment disorder and childhood trauma and all of the concepts that we use now you could think of largely as neo-Freudian. That's how I think of it. So the idea is that child's born, comes into the big bad world, child is a blank slate, the big bad world happens, affects the poor innocent child, and creates a dysfunctional end product. That's essentially what most left-leaning helping professionals think, and I think that's largely is the case. But we need to understand some of the subtleties here. Does anybody, most of you probably do know about the ACE study. So the Adverse Childhood Experiences study is what helped us to catalogue adverse childhood experiences, to understand what is an adversity in childhood that would create trauma, how many of them do we need to suffer before we wind up becoming a crack-smoking, heavy gambling sex addict, and exactly how it works. And the ACE study was huge. It was conducted over 17,000 people of predominantly middle-class socioeconomic groups. So first thing we can say is adverse childhoods aren't confined to ghetto underclass. That's the first big thing that it found. Secondly, that there are specific types of childhood adversity that we could count, and that there's then a dose-response relationship. So the more of these you suffered, and the more intensity with which you suffered them, the greater an addict or unwell adult you're going to become. Because it's not just addiction that they linked it to. They linked it to bronchitis, they linked it to increased diabetes, greater obesity, etc. So if we've suffered these types of childhood adversity a lot, we will almost certainly be unwell as an adult, and that's a whole range of physiological illnesses and psychopathologies, including addiction. And the way they first got onto this was they were running a weight loss program at Kaiser Permanente medical group, and they found that when people started to lose weight, they just didn't come back. Then started to lose a little bit of weight. So it's treating obese patients, and when they started to drop a little bit of weight, they just disappeared. And then they speculated that they were disappearing because they didn't want to lose the weight. And then they started to think, why don't they want to lose the weight? Is there something protective about the weight? So then, being good Freudian therapists, they decided it must be to do with childhood, which it probably is. And they decided this could be a coping mechanism. So think about it. If you are being predated on by a sexual predator, it might be helpful if you're fatter, if I can use that word. It might make you less sexually attracted to a predator. Eating highly palatable foodstuffs with lots of calories in them is quite self-medicating, so it might make you feel better. Anyway, they decided this is all speculation, so they were going to look into it and do a massive study, which they did. And who knows what these childhood adversities are? There's 10 that they commonly use. We could split them into 3 categories, first of all: abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. I think sexual, physical, and emotional abuse, emotional and physical neglect, and household dysfunction is separation, divorce of parents. Someone or an adult around you using substances, an adult around you in prison, an adult around you who means something to you who's not well, mentally well. And this number 1 here, battered mother. I can't, for the life of me, I can't understand how a bunch of left-leaning helping professionals manage to use that terminology. For a start, it could be battered father. We'll call it domestic violence, shall we? And pertinent to this, whilst I was building this PowerPoint, I was also reading Mike Tyson's autobiography. And Mike's a very controversial person, and a famously publicly a recovering person at the moment as well. And this point is pertinent to him. Firstly, he became a fighter, and a very controversial one, and some would say a very dysfunctional one. But up until the age of 19, just before he won the World Championship, that's not the case. He was a very well-regulated young man compared to where he came from, because he had mentoring and a very strong bond with that mentor. He was a much older Italian man called Custamato. He was a complete nut job, but what he did do a lot of was affirmations, positive speaking, behave like this, behave like that. So he was modeling the guy's behavior, the way he thought, the way he felt all the time. And then he died when Mike Tyson was 19. So having taken Mike Tyson out of reform school, going to social services and saying, please don't send him back to Brooklyn, keep him here with me in the Catskill Mountains, which they did. And he had a wonderful teenage years, actually. And then just as he was about to become successful, Cuss died. And there's a lot of speculation as to the effect that then had on Mike Tyson. He went back to ghetto Mike, and it was downhill all the way, until he got into much recent years and met recovering people. When Cuss's teaching started to come back, when he met other elders in the rooms, in the 12-step fellowships, who then brought up Cuss's teachings again, because you can't really forget what you learn. But he had a battered stepfather, or a male partner in the house. There were lots of male partners in his house because his mother was in the sex industry. And this gentleman went to sleep on the sofa and had done something wrong. He defended Mike's mother in some way. And so she gently and quietly and very calmly went and put on a cup of tea and boiled the kettle, and then just came past him and poured it all over him. And there's a passage in the book where Mike and his sister, like this guy's screaming and running all down the hallways of the apartments, completely scalded, and Mike's sister is sterilising a needle and popping the blisters. Within an hour, that gentleman was at the 7-Eleven buying the mum some alcohol to placate her. So there's domestic violence on the father figure, and then placatory doormat behaviour on by the abused husband. So I'm not really, I think that should have been domestic violence, not battered mother. So that's one model, is childhood adversity. Yes, we definitely understand the link. So there's big risks now if we're going to be doing a fighting sport, clearly. Or is it that we can channel those energies? We do need to understand the disease model quickly though. So not only is our environment since we were born affecting us, clearly it is, there's another way of thinking about things. Clearly we're not born with no a priori knowledge of anything at all. Clearly we're not a totally blank slate. First thing to say is, who's read Gabor Mate's In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts? Yeah, so first thing to say is that any genetic variations we might have that might predispose us to addiction are definitely going to be expressed by the environment. So if I have a very protective environment, lots of protective factors against addiction, like social support, then those gene variants won't necessarily cause me any troubles. But let's say I don't. Let's say I do have an adverse childhood environment. Well, if I have gene variants like the DRD2 TAC1 allele, which you don't need to remember, you'll be glad to know, just think of it as a dopamine building gene. It builds receptor sites actually. And if I have a mutation of that, I might not be building dopamine receptor sites very efficiently. And dopamine is doing a lot of jobs, but one thing it is doing is helping us to feel rewarded and pleasured and meaningful. We now know it's not simply a reward and pleasure neurochemical. It controls how we find meaning in things, what we call salience. So how we attribute importance to things and which things those are. Right, if that is not working properly, and an adverse environment would very much help that to not be working properly and express that, or if you think of the analogy of a light switch on or off, an adverse environment will switch that gene mutation on and we're not building receptor sites very efficiently, we're feeling naturally unrewarded and unpleasured as well. So now we've got double trouble. And the way that this works, I'll go through it very, very quickly. We explain this to the boys in psychoeducation because it's important for them to know. So you're born with what is effectively primary, chronic and progressive brain illness, or the potential for it. An adverse environment will add to that and express that potential, and you become dopamine dysregulated. That causes you to experience blunted pleasure response to life. You can't suck the reward and meaning out of things, ordinary things that other people would be able to. You go to a barbecue or somewhere when you're an adolescent and you're finally able to get out into the environment and get things like drugs, alcohol, sex. You find those things, you take them, that then upregulates your dopamine tone, your midbrain dopamine function, and you feel rewarded and pleasured. Now, us having massive brains, unlike most other animals, then we're going to learn and remember that. So if we've been sick with symptoms for 15 years, 16 years, 17 years, and we know this is an adolescent disease, right? The onset is usually in adolescence. Then we find a medicine, effectively, something which makes us feel pleasured and rewarded. There's no way that our big, sophisticated cortex is going to forget that. And it's going to learn and remember that that object is what we should use, that drug is what we should use, that behavior makes us feel rewarded. So this is plasticity at work. So again, this is really a developmental model. When we understand that heroin makes us feel really, really good, and we've been feeling really, really, really shit for 15 years, well, that is not something that your brain's emotional centers and learning centers is going to be able to forget. They're going to attach strongly to that thing and bond with that thing. So the bonding is not happening with a human because there's not enough potential to get bonded in your environment because you're from an adverse environment, so you will bond with the medicine, as it were. And then the last part of the illness is that the brain's reasoning faculties, which would ordinarily get involved and stop us from doing stupid things like taking heroin, and we'd have all sorts of social commands like you'll get sent to prison, mummy and daddy wouldn't like it, I might get diseases. That's not as important as getting rewarded, because being unrewarded is pretty catastrophic for humans. So if you think being dopamine deficient is not a big problem, it's not in essence much different from having very poor sense of sight or very poor sense of hearing. So if you have a poor sense of pleasure, you are disabled. Yeah. So addicts who've been born with the potential to be unrewarded and their environment's been heavily unrewarding, just think of them as disabled in that sense, and then they find the route out. So the disease works very, very effectively. It's very clever. If you think about it, why would it work any other way? Why would it put warnings in place when you've found a solution? It doesn't want the warnings. It doesn't want the big, clever frontal lobe getting in the way. So it kind of overrides thinking. So there's a much more powerful brain area that's driving that, and our modern human thinking brain is not really in the mix with addicts. That's why addicts abstain. So you get all these helpful people who explain to us why we don't need to abstain, we can just learn to control it. Well, the hindbrain is too powerful, I'm afraid. It's been around for millions and millions of years, and it's not interested in what our puny human thinking brain has got to say. It's not interested in rules. It just knows it's hungry. It's hungry for meaning, bonding, reward, survival. And it's not getting them from its human relationships, and it's not getting it from its environment. So it will find substances and behaviours to boost that and screw the consequences. So a really good book for that one, if you want what I've just explained in 40 short, very well written pages, is, this one, Howard Wetzman. So if you can't see this, taking photographs of this is pretty pointless because it's so blurry, but I will email the PowerPoint to anyone who wants it. So that then leads me to my model. So this is not evidence-based, this is pure conjecture on my part, I want you to know that. There's two ways of looking at it. We can look at it, how we've been affected since we were in utero, since we were in the mother's womb, stroke all the way through our childhood, our life, how we've developed since zero. That's the developmental model. That's the idea, is that is what creates dysfunctional adults, the environment. But what about the ancestral environment? We haven't just been developing effectively for 44 years in my case. We've been evolving for millions of years, so there's this thing called evolution that's getting in the way. And the brain's dopamine system, the reward circuit, the meaning and pleasure circuit, has evolved over millions of years. And what's it evolved to do? These things above the red line here. In essence, calories, sex and love, or at least nurturing, but anything which will help us survive and further our genetic lineage, status and resources, which also obviously help us replicate our genes, and ultimately for modern thinking humans, meaning as well. The very, very clever ones amongst you will have worked out that this is also Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's like an ancestral hierarchy of needs. And so these are the things that humans need, and this is how our brains dopamine function evolved, to locate and find these things, right? And then you look under it, and these are our addictions. And I mean, you can move them across, shift them around, and play the addiction game. You shouldn't turn this into a board game. Try and find out which one of those anorexia might go under, because I didn't put it under calorie finding. It's nothing to do with calories in this sense. Ask yourself, where's the meaning? Where's the reward in the addiction? What is it giving me? And then ask yourself, does that reward confer with ancestral behaviors that were important for us? And it always does. So for me, anorexia, you might want to put that under winning. If you had a sort of psychiatric model where some clinicians assume that anorexia is to do with kind of some kind of existential becoming, so you're becoming your own person by pushing your parents to one side and saying, no, I'm going to control my life, not you, and I'm going to prove it to you. by driving you absolutely mad by calorie restricting till I nearly die and really scare you. Or you could look at it as status. Is it thinness? Is it actually not about calorie restriction at all? It's about thinness, because thinness confers status, and status pumps dopamine tone. Though it might seem crazy to anybody who's not body dysmorphic, but social media is pumping out thin is good. Girls, because it usually is girls, think, yeah, thin is good. They restrict calories and then they are thin and beautiful and wanted in their own mind, and then they get the status. Could it be that? So you're always asking yourself, where's the reward and where's the meaning in this addiction? Because oftentimes it's very difficult to see. So you can take any addiction and put them in those categories. Sex and love, of course, I've separated sex and love, because as you know we do that. They're very different profiles. So sex and love addict, we usually have a much greater preponderance for romancing, fish hooking people, leading people along, getting multiple people sending them texts, getting a love legitimization coming in. It's not so much about the sex. But either way, you can see an ancestral behavior there. I'm a well-groomed monkey that's having all of the nits picked out, been stroked by all the other monkeys, and I'm not getting parasites and I'm surviving. So we need nurturing. It pumps our brain's mesolimbic dopamine system very heavily. So that's the evolutionary module, which works off of, instead of thinking of plasticity, it uses a concept called modularity. So the evolutionary model, evolutionary psychology, would say the brain, don't think of the brain as being plastic so much or having being moldable. Think of it as being like a Swiss Army knife, and it evolved a different tool for every problem that it encountered in the environment. So we evolved this reward circuit because we needed to find enough calories, we needed to procreate, and we needed to do all those things. So we evolved a reward module to help us do that. And addictions are riding off of the reward module. They're a perversion of the reward module, hijacking the brain's reward module, if you like. So then the question is, why would we do that? Well, because the modern environment is quite meaningless, that's why. So this is where I draw some parallel with what Judith Landau was saying yesterday. She was talking a lot about the loss of traditional cultures and the loss of meaning. So up until probably about 200 years ago, we had fairly agreed upon belief systems. Doesn't matter whether they were nice or not, doesn't matter whether they were true or not. They were there, and they were a common point of reference for all of us, and most specifically helping you to answer questions like, what's going to happen when I die? Quite big things like that worry us quite a lot. To which we had a prescription which we could hand out. Don't worry about it. You're going to be cool. Or you're not. If you've been a sinner, you're going to go to hell. But if you haven't, then you're going to be cool. You're going to go to heaven. And of course, even those of us who'd say we're believers now, we might believe, but we don't believe in the way that our ancestors believed. No way. We just don't. There's much more doubt there. We don't really know what's going on. And at the same time, our family structures have been eviscerated. We turn from tribes to clans, to extended families, to nuclear families, to single parent families, and I'm not knocking single parent families, to single people sitting around in our lovely comfortable house full of calories, but sitting around on our own looking at a blurry avatar of somebody we hardly know. So we've got the calories, we might even have some of the esteem, we might actually have love, and this is my issue with the trauma model in the way that people don't understand it subtly enough. A lot of the boys that I get are loved. They're too loved. They are not traumatized in that sense. No, absolutely not. They're actually having a struggle to get away from their damn parents and exist as an existential adult in their own right. That's their trauma. Because I've worked in Tottenham and I've worked in Thailand. And in Tottenham I was dealing with trauma. And in Thailand I'm often dealing with a young man who might be overly loved. And as Judith told us the other day, I wouldn't use even words like enabled. because the mum is actually doing her job. She's just doing it with the wrong tone or slightly the wrong slant, but she is actually doing what a mother should be doing. She's just not quite getting it right. So I wouldn't say she's enabling his addiction as such. I'd say she's just getting it slightly wrong, or dad is. And consequently, we've got a young man who's actually quite well off in terms of calorie and self-esteem and love and nurturing, actually. He's just very, very, very badly off in terms of meaning. And if you get to the top of Maslow's pyramid, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which all good counsellors should know, and there isn't any meaning there, then what you're going to do, you're going to go back down the pyramid again and self-medicate with various forms of esteem or calories. So then we can put all our addictions in there, really. A drug use is going to give us a sense of self-esteem, some bonding, a peer group, perhaps even give us a Darwinian energy to get out there and survive. If you're a Glaswegian heroin addict, it's a good resource. Heroin addict, because you haven't got the energy or know the reason why you bother to get up off the chair to go and do anything, because there's nothing out there. So it's a survival thing. So everybody thinks addiction is about pleasure. And they're talking about the brain's pleasure chemical. You know, it's not. It's got nothing to do with pleasure whatsoever, which should be pretty obvious if you look at any addict. You go down and look at people smoking out front. You're thinking it would be really pleasurable to have a cigarette when I finish this boring lecture. But when I go down there and look at you out there, you're not going to have a look of pleasure on your face. You're going to be doing all this. You're not enjoying the cigarette, you're addicted to it. It's got meaning for you now. When you're thinking about it now, it's providing you with meaning and the reason to carry on through this damn lecture. That's what's going to get you through, because it has potent meaning for you. It is not pleasurable. If you think about it, that's the subtle difference. That's what addictions are about, survival and meaning, and not about pleasure. And who needs the meaning? Well, people who don't have meaning. And that's why we get stuck on the trauma model, because most people with trauma don't have meaning. The most fundamental of which would be, my mother doesn't love me. That's pretty meaningless when you're in that situation, but it's not confined to parental abuse and things like that. You could be loved by parents and still lacking meaning. So we do a lot of work in the Middle East, and again, very, very powerful family structures, cloying family structures actually. May or may not be abusive, maybe they are emotionally abusive, but in essence the family is very strong around them. But in Dubai, if you've got money, there's nothing to do. Who am I? What am I doing here? Nothing. Okay, we'll take some heroin then. Because humans need meaning. Right, so now's where I'm going to get to explain what the hell this has got to do with fasting. Okay, right, so we understand all these things. We understand that there are environmental issues. Ultimately, it's a lack of meaning, some of which comes through bonding. So it's not about the fighting, it's about training, first of all. None of our guys will ring fight in treatment. They won't ring fight in transitional living. They'll go through a graded system of training when they're inpatient, which goes from no contact to light contact. They go into transitional living almost certainly, as young men do, because they often don't have jobs, etc. So they can stay for a longer, extended period of treatment. They come out of transitional living, they then have the choice to ring fight, which currently 3 of our guys have done. Total of 5 fights, and most of those were losses, and I really loved the losses. The losses are brilliant. The losses are better than the wins. So you have a real devil of a job when they win, because then they get full of ego and they think that they're indestructible. And then that eventually later will lead to a learning as they find that they aren't. But bonding is the important thing that a young Fight Club of young men is involved with. Bonding with each other. So I've got this fantastic research that was done. Murray et al. Mild stress can actually make male rats more social and cooperative than they are in an unstressed environment. Much as humans come together after life-threatening events, such as a national tragedy, after a mild stress, the rats showed increased brain levels of oxytocin in its receptor and huddled and touched more. I couldn't have, apart from the fact that it's male rats and not male humans, and there are some parallels there with some of the young guys we got in there. There is not, I couldn't describe it better. Huddled and touched more. So when our guys are going through the 4 levels, and they're all watching a level 4 guy spar, 2 level 4 guys spar with each other, or they're watching a level 3 guy spar with Thai trainers, they know full well that Thai trainer's not going to damage them. They know that, and yet it's still intimidating. And then all the other guys are watching, and it is definitely what you could call a mild stress. It absolutely is. There's no way, it's like a physiological thing. Like sometimes our body does things we don't want it to do. Physiology's doing what it's doing. The puny little human thinking brain is saying don't do that, and it's having no effect because physiology is doing what it's doing. Well, this is a situation like that. Everybody knows the Thai trainer is not going to hurt the boy, but we're all watching this tense. And the Thai trainer's pulling his punches, and there's a few mild leg kicks that don't hurt massively. But it's a stress event, and then after they huddle and touch more, all the boys. It's absolutely how it works. So there's the counterintuitive thing. As that this mildly frightening and stressful event is actually creating bonding. And we know that lack of bonding and a lack of attachment is one of the drivers of addiction. Attachment disorder and childhood trauma is mainly coming out of poor attachments. So the job of any recovery program is about reinstating attachments. And how do you do that? If you try to reinstate attachment with the parents, that's a very difficult job. That takes years and fraught with problems. So usually you reinstate attachment with other recovering addicts, right? And this just accelerates that process because they've been through a unique experience together. And they are doing effectively what young men should be doing. Now, there's some, could be controversial if you said this might not work so well with young women, but I'm not sure that it would, because I'm not sure that young men tend to be actually, in some senses, less individual-minded than women. They tend to follow hierarchies slightly more easily. And so once you've got these senior young men, if you want to call them that, or the ones who are furthest along in their progress, the others tend to fall in behind them, which is the other reason why you've got to really do something compelling, like Muay Thai boxing. It's not very good to be doing something boring. You want to be doing something slightly compelling, because then there's genuine admiration for these boys that have already been through that, so they just fall into line behind them. So the senior guys are following us because, again, most of the counsellors will have some ring fighting experience. So Robert, our head of support, is very, very experienced Muay Thai fighter. Javier, our head counsellor, has got significant ring fighting experience. I haven't done it for a long time, but I have ring fighting experience. And so we're not asking the boys to do something we haven't done, which is another example of something which is compelling. So with young men, they have to have a compelling, they have to be going on some kind of odyssey, otherwise they're just not interested. And drug use is such an odyssey. That's exactly what addiction is. This world's too boring and meaningless for me, and there's no belief system that I can grab onto. I need an odyssey. I need an adventure, even if it results in my death. That is, you just described addiction. So if it's not equally compelling, it's not going to work. And of course, fellowship is compelling in that sense. To hear people telling shameful stories you never thought anyone would be honest about is really compelling. So the Muay Thai boxing works in the same way. It's also, though, obviously about making it safe-ish. You don't want to make it too safe, because then you've lost that dynamic that I was just talking about. But if you don't make it safe enough, you've got loads of parents, usually from the States, phoning you up, using words like lawyer, and I come out in a rash when I hear the word lawyer. And so it's got to be contained, and it absolutely can be. It's totally doable, and this is how you do it. First of all, like you would with any kind of trauma model, you build resilience and grounding. And intimacy with the others around them is a support network's part of that. So you've got to build intimacy with the people around them and resilience to unpleasant feelings and situations well before you start putting them in a ring or any situation. Just like you would before you started to enter the trauma treatment phase of the program. You've got to do iCAAD, resilience building, grounding, teaching grounding exercises long before you get there. And mindfulness is exactly that kind of grounding technique. There's no better grounding technique than mindfulness meditation, which we've always used anyway because we're in Thailand. So even on our mainstream program, we use mindfulness meditation, and we use it around pain and discomfort, which is an exact analogue of cravings for drugs, really. Cravings for drugs is a discomfort. So you tell any Westerner to sort of kneel down cross-legged, they're going to be in pain and discomfort within about 90 seconds. So that's what we do. We go into a relatively stressed position, and within about a minute, imagine he's cross-legged, he's got pain up his arse like that, and he's going, ah. So the internal dialogue is, got a pain in my butt, pain in my butt, pain in my butt. Is it still there? Yes. Is it pulsating? Yes. How quickly is it pulsating? Very fast. What sort of colour would you describe that pulsation as? I don't know, green. Okay, pain in my butt, pain in my butt, pain in my butt. Still there. Yeah, it's pulsating more now. Okay, you need to move then. Like this. Rising, rising, rising. Intention to walk, intention to walk, intention to walk. Because you can walk in Vipassana meditation. It's informal. Right foot goes thus. Left foot goes thus. And off he goes wandering around the room. But he's meditating and he's relieving his leg. But he's doing it slowly. So what's he building? He's building bodily awareness, which is what you do in grounding before you begin trauma work. You have to be able to ground yourself before the traumatic material may come up. And what's the other thing you do in trauma work? According to people like Peter Levine, who wrote Waking the Tiger. Do you look directly at the Medusa? So Medusa is a good analogy to use. So Perseus approaches Medusa with his shield, which he uses as a mirror, because he's got to cut Medusa's head off, obviously. She's the villain and needs to be decapitated. She's the trauma. So trauma is only resolved when we find a solution, and we don't do it by looking at the trauma. You do it by looking at something else which is faux traumatic or mock traumatic, possibly, and then so he's looking in his shield at Medusa, but he's not looking at the trauma directly. So he's going through a trauma which he's going to resolve by fighting or fleeing, not by freezing. And when he resolves that trauma, he resolves that trauma, partly, or starts to dissolve it, because he's found an effective way of breaking out the freeze. So for my young men, being mollycoddled by parents in middle-class Australia is a freeze. We're in an existential freeze. If you talk to them about that, they just get all ego-y about it and they don't want to hear about it. Well, let's say they have got a proper deep-seated trauma. Well, the boxing and triathlon, as I'll show you, are at least significantly stressful. You find a solution for that and resolve it and complete the gestalt, finish it. You've resolved, you've proven your ability to deal with traumatic material and thereby become an existential adult, finally. Yeah? The other thing you must do at the beginning is build intimacy between the group. So this is where we're massively poverty-stricken again. So this is another thing Judith Landau was talking about yesterday. That's exactly my feelings on it. My mentor's mentor, my sponsor's sponsor was a Mohican. My sponsor was a Irish London travelling man. We used to use the word gypsy. We don't use that word anymore because it's pejorative, so we'd say travelling man. And his sponsor was a Mohican, if you can believe that. It kind of gets crazier as it goes along, this story. And Don, the Mohican guy, used to talk about, I can even remember the word he had for it in his language, he used to talk about how to introduce yourself to people should not be done quickly. So this is a thing you see in traditional cultures a lot. In fact, it's often done extremely slowly, painfully slowly. And he had a word for it, and he called it natashniha, which I would, is exactly analogous, more or less in this sense, to the Chinese concept of qi and the Japanese concept of ki, at least as in meaning an energy that flows between two people, which if you're very bodily aware sometimes you'll realise actually happens somewhere in your body. It happens around your navel. Can't explain that, that's just how I've experienced it. And it can be good, bad or indifferent. So you can feel if someone's crossing the road to attack you, if you're very bodily aware. And if you think about it, you will say to people, I knew what their intentions were before it happened. And you might have actually felt it, kind of rubbing you there. That's their key, coming across the street. So their intentions came at you before they came at you. That's ki, chi, natashniha, call it what you want. It's a type of energy. And that can also happen in a good way. But one thing for sure, when you meet someone, you don't know them. So I'm going to talk frankly now. If you want to see how that doesn't work, come to a conference. It's just the endless amounts of bullshit. And not particularly judging that, it's what we do. We do it to do business. We do it because we make small talk, because a small talk is our version of natashniha. And it's woefully inadequate. I'm frequently just having to go upstairs and lie on my bed to sort of de-bullshitize and sort of like, and that's not like, I'm not thinking I'm more authentic than all you guys. The one thing I know, I notice that level of shallowness that's going on. And it does my head in. And that's where we're at. That's where we're at in our culture. Yeah, okay, we need to do business, but is there another way that we could all get to know each other first before it began, or something like that? And that's what's missing. We don't have intimacy, all of us, those of us who don't know each other well, and we haven't done any rituals to get to know each other. And so it's kind of bullshitty when we do get to know each other. And you know what I'm talking about. You totally know what I'm talking about. So we insist that that does not happen between the young men, because they're about to undergo a trauma. So what they do is the young man who's recently come in has to come in and introduce formally. And I'm not talking about life stories or war stories where they come in and show us their beautiful mask of what a badass they are or something, and we have to listen to their nonsense for half an hour. We instruct them against that. Do not do that. Okay? Don't give us your glorious persona of who you would like us to think you are rather than who you actually are. What we actually want is just literal information on family of origin. Again, no detail, because it might be traumatic. Literal family of origin stuff. So this is the way my Mohican mentor would have done it. It would have been, my name's Ali, my father was a member of the Turtle clan and da-da-da and back, and my mother was so-and-so from the Bear clan and back, and here's a canoe that I'm going to give to you, or whatever the heck it was. But if you think about it, that'd be a bit ridiculous. We don't have an innate knowledge of who our ancestors were. I could make something up. My father's father was Mordey, and he was roving across the Highlands of Scotland, and he conquered many enemies and da-da-da. It'd just be bullshit, wouldn't it? Because I don't have a clue. I've heard vague stories that he was a serious alcoholic, etc., etc., etc. But I don't really know. So what we'll do, we'll just give a basic account. I come from here, my brother's this, he does that, my mum's this, they do that. I have found it difficult to get on with my parents over the last 2 years. When they start bullshitting, everybody pulls them back. Because you're talking too much, man, talking too much, and the other boys do that as well, because they've got more real by this point. And they can police the new guy a little bit. And we get out a basic idea of who they are. That's the first thing we have to do. We have to have a picture in our mind of who you are in order that we can trust you, because that's how life works. And of course we can't completely know you, but it's the start. It's very important to do. And as I said, the training will occur on multiple levels. From no contact right through to light sparring with each other. Right from the word go, though, the cardio is quite intense. And there's a reason for that I'll go into. We also have to use debrief protocols. So you have to be asking questions all the time as to how this experience is going for them. So you could begin a counselling session with debriefing techniques, hands on the arm of the chair, What does the texture feel like? What are the colours in the room that you particularly like? Is there somewhere you can ground yourself if this gets a bit heavy boots? And then in. And part of it is to use debrief questions like, how has the training made you feel today about your body? And we're talking about body image. Right, so here's the other presenting factor that we get, megarexics. So what we now call megarexics, young men usually, a kind of type of male anorexia if you like. So a typical presentation might be meth addict, which is wonderful for hand in hand with calorie restriction. So it really is kind of like a male type of anorexia. Methamphetamine use, which helps us lose weight. He's calorie restricting, he's taking protein shakes, steroids, he's bodybuilding at the same time as being a meth dealer. He's still keeping up his bodybuilding. So here he is, huge trapezius, huge deltoids, huge triceps, which help the frame look bigger, and abs, etc. An obsession with the world seeing the abs, so the social media's there to augment and intensify the addiction, the body dysmorphia, and get the reward and meaning from everyone going like. We like you, you look like what heroes look like, apart from you're not one, because you can't even stand up and do pad work with me, you look scared. And slowly but surely they can start to fess up to that and admit to that. Yeah, when they hate it because a lot of times their frame gets smaller when they do Muay Thai. So it's a bit like, they hate it as much as anyone on an eating disorders program would hate to get taking calories in. They hate it because they're losing their bulk. When you do Muay Thai, you start to thin down. And that's very challenging, so we need to talk about that. And so how did you feel body image-wise compared to the other men? I feel small, I feel thin. I'm thinking you look like you've got arms like tree trunks still. But he's body dysmorphic, of course. Did you feel intimidated? Can you put a number on it? Can you think why it was? Is anything coming up for you? Is there in fact traumas which you didn't perhaps even know about before you came to treatment, so we didn't pick up initially? Is that an issue? Maybe, very well maybe. And obviously, were you in pain or discomfort, so we can get the medical team involved if necessary, or change the massage program. So it's not about fighting, it's about transformation through adversity. And you can pick millions of routes to help people engage a program of transformation through, but it will always be through adversity. So a lot of existential thinkers have given us loads of material on this over hundreds of years. We've known that our societies are becoming more meaningless. They're perhaps not adverse enough, oftentimes. We evolved through adversity. And yet we're kind of taught to think that as long as you've got a full belly, some cash, and it's all good. But it's not looking that way. You know, the evidence doesn't point to that. In fact, I twittered a map the other day of opioid use, and the high opioid use countries were in red, and it was like an inversely proportional map of poverty. So the most advanced, industrialized, postmodern nations were extremely high opioid users, to which you will quickly say, yes, that's because they've got more cash, or it's because obviously big pharma companies will only target the countries that have got a lot of disposable income. No, I don't think so. I think they're the most meaningless countries. And again, this is my issue with not having the correct understanding of the childhood trauma model, which says that bad things make you become difficulties and adversities mean you'll become addicted as an adult. No, sub-Saharan Africa has the highest rate of difficulties. It has the highest rate of child soldiers, for example, so presumably the highest rate of childhood trauma. It's not the existence of childhood trauma that causes addiction, it's a lack of meaningful belief systems to make sense of the trauma that creates addiction. So sub-Saharan Africa presumably still has a lot of traditional culture intact and a lower rate of emotional poverty, just to use one example, as might Southern Europe compared to Northern Europe, to use another example. And this always bears out in addiction rates. The more extended family and so on is in place and traditional culture is in place, despite the poverty and adversity, the lower the rate of addiction. So that's APA's wording, not mine. So American Psychological Association said it's not poverty per se. There are protective factors. Experiencing a trauma is no indicator of ongoing pathology. When protective factors are in place, such as strong social support, it will most likely not remain traumatic. In other words, there are ways of getting around it. Social support and belief systems help you get around trauma, help it to not become pathological. So Nietzsche told us that, and he's got a ridiculously unfair reputation, really. I think was quite misunderstood, and he interpreted industrialization and Darwin's discovery of the evolutionary process as being very, very problematic. He was an atheist, but he was really, really worried about what would happen when traditional formal religion, and I'm not advocating that everybody should be formally religious, but he was worried about it, despite the fact that he was an atheist. And he's very interested in Buddhism, as his mentor was. Schopenhauer was also really interested in Buddhism, because he realized that we needed belief systems. So if we didn't recruit it through formal Christianity, where would we get it from? And he was very, very worried that we'd get it from two places: men gods, dictators, and that there'd be genocide as a result of that, or social chaos. And so if you think about it, that's quite prescient. Those both occurred in that order as well. So we invested our belief in men gods who were nut jobs to a man, and we look at the result of that: mass genocide across China, Soviet Union and Europe. And then when we realised that wasn't particularly cool, and we changed all of that, then we sort of descended into social chaos, and it's quite amoral. And again, I'm not suggesting that we should be more illiberal, but we descended into high rates of addiction, anything goes, and so on. So as Dostoevsky, I think, said something like, "There's no God, anything goes." Well, that's a bit of generalisation, but in general, that's what happened. So you could say, if there's no meaningful shared belief systems that are potent and believable and give you a way of making sense out of suffering, then anything goes. And you might as well nihilistically kill yourself with drugs and have a good time whilst you're doing it. So then Carl Jung kind of added something to that. He said, yeah, one of the things about traditional culture that gave us meaningful belief systems, or gave us a way of dealing with the unknown, dealing with suffering, was initiation. So specifically for young men in traditional cultures, there would be an initiation ceremony that involves a fairly significant pain and fear, a small manageable chunk of pain and fear, which when you go through that, when you come out the other side, you can say that you're an existential adult, because you managed to enter the unknown, something for which you have no solution or answer, and which threw you into complete chaos, really. And then you came out the other side, and you were much more existentially robust. And so, what does that remind you of? What's the modern equivalent of that? You go down into this horrible place and you don't have any answers for this thing, and you're in a chaotic place and terrible things are happening, and then you come out from that and find a way of moving on, and you become existentially much more aware. Addiction and recovery. Is it not? Addiction is an unknown, or it becomes such. So Jung's idea, and I completely agree with it, was that on some level addiction is there's something going on there with modern people, where they know that they're not having enough of an experience or something. I wouldn't necessarily be saying they're choosing adversity, but perhaps they know there's something in this. They're going to widen their experience significantly by altering their state of consciousness. And then when we come out the other side of it, we have no choice but to grow and develop existentially. So in a way, it's a kind of an odyssey addiction, isn't it, really, if you think about it? If you get recovery. If you don't, you die in the underworld. So it's the descent into the underworld, which usually results in death. If you think about all the sagas, it does usually involve death. If it didn't involve death, it wouldn't be dramatic enough to be a story, would it? And there's quite a lot of parallels there with addiction. And I do sometimes wonder if subconsciously that's what people who have all their calories and they have all the esteem that they might need might well be doing. Because otherwise, what is the explanation for people who are quite well catered for, who still become addicts, to which you'd say it's emotional trauma. The family was abusive, even though it was middle class. Well, I don't call being loved a lot abusive, really. Yes, maybe, but maybe not. Just check up a little bit of that. Important point. When they're doing the boxing, we've developed resilience already, so they're able to take manageable chunks of stress. But then taking more and more stress increases the resilience. And then through repetition, anything worth having needs to be repeated, so they're encountering boredom to a certain extent as well. And then having momentary realizations that the boredom and struggle that they've gone through has now suddenly, this morning, given them something. They'll wake up, say one morning, and feel actually quite good. Their mood is elevated. And we say that's how it is. You go struggle, 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 then you get a little bit of sunshine. And so it's like delayed gratification. They start to make the link between repetition, 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 and not necessarily highly interesting, followed by result. Oh yeah, I'm quicker, I'm lighter on my feet, I've got that movement down, I've got the respect of these guys, I feel better today in terms of mood. And they start to equate hard work with feeling good. So repetition is very important, and arguably possibly slightly less boring than meditation. Which, let's face it, for young men a lot of the time is a bit of a big ask to do long, long periods of meditation. So think of it as a moving meditation. So there's the other side to it, which is the triathlon track. So there'll be certain guys who are more suited to doing triathlon, not fighting. And that will include natural fighters, people who are already quite accomplished at martial arts. There's no therapeutic gain in them becoming better and better at that. There's therapeutic gain in them going into something else and struggling in something else. So triathlon is another excellent adverse experience that's got therapeutic possibility in it. So we could be talking anything between, usually at triathlons, because we compete in real life events, I'll detail them at the end, that will be between a 1 and 2K swim in the sea. All of our triathlons have been in the sea. A 50 to 100 kilometre cycle ride, frequently in the mountains, so they're frequently quite mountainous. A 10 to 20 kilometre, so 7 to 15 mile run just to finish off. Easily capable of doing that. It's not a big ask for a young man. We evolved through adversity. This is the default setting. Sitting on arse is not default setting evolutionarily. Doing that is default setting. So a fit grandmother or grandfather can walk 30, 40 miles a day if they had to. That's how we evolved. We're nature's endurance experts. There's only wolves and a couple of other mammals that are as good as us at it, that can cover massive distances in the day. Most mammals, even your lions, tigers, cheetahs, they can't do those distances. They're hopeless. Hopeless endurance athletes. They conk out after about 5 6 miles of continuous walking. For us, it's our default setting. Consequently, our neurochemistry quite likes it when we do it. So when we do hard cardio, I'm not talking about a little jog, and the links here with exercise addiction, people go, oh, what about exercise addiction? And I'm like, I'm going to weigh them up, right? On the way up, saving dozens and dozens of young men from heroin addiction, there's a possibility that one of them in 15 years' time might have a knee operation because he's a bit obsessed with running, and I'm going to go with this one. We get loads of lovely neurochemistry when we run a lot. If it was a little jog that gave it, believe me, I'd just be doing little jogs because I'm lazy. But it's not. It's hard cardio, which for young men, as I said, unless there's some kind of real physiological problem, you should be able to do. You've got loads of endorphins, killing the pain in your knees and hips. So that's why the first 5 to 10 minutes of any run, even if you warm up, they say warm up, it doesn't do anything. You're still in pain for the first 10 minutes of running because the endorphins aren't kicking in yet, the painkillers aren't kicking in yet, and when they do, you feel good. And it raises mood for a significant time period after you've stopped running as well. We've got those encapsulins and endocannabinoids floating around in their brain, not obviously to the level where it's going to impair them, to the level where they're going to feel better, they're going to be more awake in group, they're going to be easier to get on with, and the more you do it, and here's where plasticity comes in again, the better your nervous system gets at doing it. So this is the overall reason why we use behavioural treatment to treat addiction, not just clunky chemical compounds, pills, because when you teach your brain what to do, it gets progressively better at doing it and works out some of the problems itself, because it's plastic, it has the principle of plasticity. If you just use a clunky chemical, a medicine, to fix the problem, all it does is fix that problem, doesn't do anything else. So, with the other lifestyle changes intertwined with it, it's an effective solution. Obviously, you've got to do the fellowship, you've got to do the social bonding, you've got to do the family work, you've got to do all these things, you've got to get the diet right. And this will be a fairly high calorie diet because they'll be getting really miserable if they don't have enough calories. So again, this is the bit where we don't get some woolly nutritionist who's obsessed with salads in. We get somebody who understands that these are athletes and that they need a high calorie diet. And if you get that wrong, you've got a very, very depressed person because they haven't got enough calories in their system. So you have to do it with a nutritionist who understands an athlete's needs. So as I said, these guys are some of our guys. This guy's got about a year up now. He's always on the podium now. So he's quite a stocky guy who wouldn't have, usually you thought would have probably gone with the boxing, not the triathlon. But he actually started to prefer the triathlon and switched, and it done him the world of good actually, in terms of taking him away from his tendency to solve things with fighting. And surprisingly, he's really, really fast. He's stocky, so stocky is usually not good in triathlon. Especially on the shorter distance triathlons, he's on the podium every time, this guy. So much so, I'm getting really quite concerned about him being on the podium too much. I'm like, I need him to lose a couple of times to deflate his ego a little bit, which we do. You know, we constantly saying to him, everybody's saying to him, is, you know, what else is there going on here? What else was interesting? Did you enjoy being with us? Because afterwards, you just buggered off. You got your photo taken and you buggered off. What are you doing? We're here, remember us, the guys who you drove here with? But, and he gets it. And this chap, again, similar clean time now. We've got 3 Muay Thai fighters that we've produced, 5 fights, 3 of them were losses, which as I say, are great. I love the losses. They teach them a lot. You saw that photograph back there with the guy on his knees. He just got taken out by leg kicks in his second fight, which is quite unpleasant. But he knew to go down. You know, he knew he wasn't going to carry on there. And he then went for about a month or 2 period. I did quite a lot of one-on-ones with him, which I don't do a lot of these days. I don't do a lot of clinical work, but I always make myself available to the alumni who are ring fighting. Because I understand the dopaminergic crash that you get when you lose a fight. It can be catastrophic if you didn't have the right tools to deal with it. And that's something you'll see in boxers who have different psychological mindsets. So certain boxers don't recover because it's all about the boxing. And we've done 6 triathlons now, I think, or 5. All of them in Thailand. This chap was again very, very bulky. He was the omegarexic guy, one of those guys. I know he looks big, but believe me, he's not big compared to what he was. He slimmed down significantly to what should probably be pretty much his right shape. And he found cycling and running in particular really, really difficult. In fact, he couldn't really swim, actually, to start with. And we had to teach him to swim. He just swum through the Gulf of Thailand 1.5 kilometers, and it was relatively rough. And then a long cycle ride through the mountains, and then a long run. And it was extremely hot, because it always is in Thailand, which just adds to the suffering, really. Just hot and humid, and he's always upbeat. I was moaning an awful lot more than he was, I'm ashamed to say. Whinging and whinging. And that was a great experience for him. But I'd say the most interesting one we've done is the Mekong River one. There are 5 finishes in that from the project. And that involved getting up at 5 in the morning in the Golden Triangle in January, and it's quite cold in the mountains in the Golden Triangle in January. 5 a.m. jumping in the Mekong, which is kind of like a bit wider than the Mississippi, I think, as a Golden Triangle. It's about half a mile wide. And they told us all about the pythons and alligators just as we were on the boat about to jump in. And they also said, don't avoid that whirlpool just to the right of the buoys there, because if you get in that, you won't be able to get out of it. To which we were just thinking, well, safety in numbers, it's about 200 of us here, should be all right. And if you go in the whirlpool, that's where all the python are going to be as well, because they can't get out either. So that was a kind of, lots of lifeboats and things around. And we hope this July that we'll have our first Ironman finisher. And that will be in Monaco. So one of our guys is travelling to south of France. Sorry, that's a typo, that should say Nice. I keep getting that wrong. The Nice Ironman. And he'll finish it. What sort of state he'll finish in, we don't know. Again, that's part of it. Try and finish in a good state. Don't concentrate on the time. Concentrate on bodily awareness. Be mindful. Pace yourself. Enjoy the experience. Help someone else on the way. If people are sparked out, and often the front runners, the athletes, you'll see them sparked out and shaking and twitching on the side of the road because they've misjudged it and they've run too fast in the heat. You see something like that, our guys have to stop, because most people don't stop. They carry on running because they're competitive and they want to win and do this and do that. Well, our guys, the instruction is stop, be helpful, do what you can. And on that, it's got to be about service. We haven't managed to use any of the boxing events as fundraisers yet, but 2 of the triathlons we've managed to get 3 of the guys in particular fundraising. $500 for one event and about $250 for the second event. And then we put that money into our foundation, because the cabin has a not-for-profit wing called the foundation. So we bank that money, and then the guys decide which charity they want to disseminate the money to. And in this case it was a charity called Creating Changes Netherlands, which is probably the one that we'll run with mainly, because it's a guy called Ron who goes up into the hill tribes, and it's aid really, it's not community development. So we're thinking, how can we turn this to community development, not just aid? But the aid that Ron provides is excellent. So he has literally like a caseload up in the hill tribes of specific individuals that need specific things in specific villages. So this was when we were on a visit to a disabled guy who was about my age, but he'd been disabled, he was already disabled, and then he'd been fallen into a fire when he was about 3 or 4 because his parents were opium addicts. So here's where we see the different waves or the different epidemics that have gone through the Golden Triangle. So in the 70s, it was opium in the Golden Triangle, and his parents were missing, physical neglect, adverse childhood experience. They weren't in the house. So he's was quite badly burned. Still, it just lies on a table outside under the veranda, under the sala. So when we got there, his mother is still alive. She's very elderly, still an opium addict. And we turned up, and he's just lying on a table outside. So Ron takes him blankets because it gets cold at night, and they're ruined after 6 months, and you have to get new blankets. Specific type of milk, this, that, and the other, and a few candy and stuff. And so we rock in and see him there, and then this little geezer comes down over the hill, and sort of quite often comes down to play with the old lady. And so we start trying to get to the bottom of why he comes down from over the hill, or what it is that's over the hill. And she says, well, there's army going up all the time, so what we think is meth labs over the top of the hill, for sure, because now it's meth. So opium's mainly gone, only the old folk, the opium addicts are old people. The new wave or epidemic of addiction is methamphetamine, yaba, pill form, methamphetamine, and ice, they call it, ice. And that's going on over the hill. So we reckon what was happening with this young fellow is he comes down to get away from the parents, obviously. So it's the same the world over, isn't it? And it's a pandemic. You know, I think Judith talked yesterday about, I heard the word epidemic mentioned twice, and it's not an epidemic. It's an epidemic in each location. Globally, it's a pandemic. So this is happening on every continent, because every continent has a culture which is becoming increasingly advanced and meaningless. It needs to self-medicate en masse. So what we're looking at really is mass mental illness, really, brought on by total destruction of our traditional cultures and belief systems at a speed that we can't cope with, because we haven't evolved meaningful belief systems to take place of it yet. And arguably 12-step fellowship recovery programs are an answer to that. So one of Nietzsche's works, Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Zarathustra is an ancient Persian god who predates Jesus and the Buddha, and he comes down from the mountains and proclaims that God is dead. So you all know that quote. Of course he's saying you're in the modern age now, and God is dead, which arguably he, she, or it is for most people. But there is an exception to that, which he called the Übermensch, which gets a lot of bad press again, Superman, Overman. But he should probably call it the Underman, because the Underman is somebody who re-evaluates values and comes to their own embodied version of spirituality. So they find their own spirituality. They don't need a religion to teach them it. What they do need is experiences that make them spiritual, if you like, because they have no choice. And to that end, they're the underman, because they've gone under before going over, before coming out and being transformed. So if you think there are 23 million recovering people in North America alone, or who've been in a program at some point, and interestingly, exact similar amount are currently addicted to something. There's a very, very large movement of people who've re-evaluated their value systems and have a sort of new wave spirituality, which is very much based in reality. It's based in recovery from addiction. It's not based on what the priest told them, what the rabbi told them, what somebody else told them. It's something that somebody else who embodied that knowledge showed them. And so that arguably is something that's been thrust upon us at pandemic levels, and we can't escape. The only escape is recovery. So I hope that makes sense. Thank you. There are references here. You won't be able to take a photograph of that, it's too blurry. Give me your email address and I'll email you the PowerPoint if you want.